The Foreign Miners Tax of 1850.
By Brandon Grunder and Logan C.
The California Gold Rush was a large force in shaping present-day America and California. People from all over the U.S. came to California in hopes of finding gold and becoming rich. However, when word spread around the world and foreigners started traveling with the same desires, conflicts arose between them and the natives.
It all started with the Mexican-American War. Even though Texas gained its independence from Mexico in 1836, Mexico considered it part of their nation and threatened war against anyone who wanted to take it. Originally, America didn't even consider annexation of Texas. That was until Polk was elected as president of the U.S. in 1844. His major objective was to expand the U.S. toward the Pacific Ocean. When he attempted to purchase California, New Mexico, and other states from Mexico, they shot his offer down, and he was forced to attack Mexico for this land. He started war by bringing troops into an area near the Rio Grande known as Coahuila. Mexico didn't like this and attacked the troops, killing 12 and capturing 52. The U.S. fought back and defeated the Mexicans in a few different battles. American troops continued to dominate Mexican forces until they were forced to give up. On February 2nd, 1848, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo was signed, and that ended the Mexican-American War. This made Mexico sell all of the land that the U.S. originally tried for $15 million. U.S. had to pay some money for war damages and other damages, but Polk had succeeded in his attempt to spread America westward. Now California was a part of the U.S., which was more beneficial than they could have ever imagined.
About a month before the treaty was signed and the war was over, something was discovered in a river in California by a man named James Marshall. James Marshall was building a sawmill for John Suter, the owner of the land in which the first gold was discovered. Word spread of the newfound gold in San Francisco when Sam Brandon published the California Star, the first newspaper in that area. He was the first to publicize the gold rush and was also the first millionaire of the time. He may have started the frenzy, even buying real estate in which gold was found on, but he wanted nothing to do with digging. He made all of his money by opening a general store and selling supplies needed to miners. At the same time that news was getting out about the gold, the U.S. had bought California and other states from Mexico. News was spreading faster and faster, especially when in August of 1848, Sam Brandon took a mule train to Louisiana and spread word of the riches. By the end of September, the whole East was interested in coming over and mining. James Polk, the U.S. president, didn't believe the news until he received an oyster tin full of gold from California. When he received it, he verified the talks of gold, and now everyone would start traveling to California. By 1849, 4,000 people were arriving in California every month, making it harder and harder to find land and gold. This also allowed people who sold supplies and other necessary things for living and mining to raise their prices for their products. Some of these people included Sam Brandon, who owned a general store, Levi Strauss, who sold jeans, and Domingo Girardelli, who sold candy.
Some people are profiting from the rarity of their goods, their ability to sell things at a really high markup. So if you look at some estimations of price comparisons, like a dozen eggs right now could range between $1.99 and $6.99 if you're getting like organic or something. But in today's money, a dozen eggs would be about $90. Buttered toast for breakfast would be about $50, and a good pair of boots would be about $3,000. So it's very expensive to purchase things. And perhaps it's not surprising then that the people who do the best during the gold rush financially, that the people who profit the most financially during the gold rush are not the people who are mining the gold, but the people who are mining the miners. People who are selling these boots at high markups, people who are selling shovels and gold mining material at a really high rate. Also, because of gender imbalances, you have a very skewed population, male to female. So for the few women who are able to, or who do desire to come into California, many of them actually are able to make a very good life for themselves by selling gendered labor, like doing laundry or running a restaurant or boarding house. So that their gendered service actually creates an opportunity for them to become economically independent.
Not only were materials incredibly overpriced, but so was the price of housing. Most miners used tents because they couldn't afford rent. Another thing that was scarce in California was women, as usually only men traveled there. The women worked in dance halls or were involved in sex commerce. Women made a lot of money as they were even paid for simple things like sitting down and having a drink with a man. Since everything was so scarce and there was so much competition in mining, the Americans didn't like that the foreigners were coming in and mining. This conflict was so strong that it even had to be resolved at the federal level.
The Chinese and Spanish-speaking miners were overpopulating California and taking the gold that the Americans felt was theirs. This conflict between the races caught the eye of California Governor Peter Burnett. In favor of the Americans' point of view, Burnett signed the Foreign Miners Tax Act of 1850. This tax forced Chinese and Mexicans who choose to mine in California to pay a fee of $20 per month, which is equivalent to a couple $100s now. Many of the foreigners decided to leave because they couldn't pay the tax. Tax collectors were even allowed to take the land that the foreigners owned if they neglected the tax. Some even resorted to killing the foreigners who didn't pay. The major purpose of the tax was not to get rid of the Chinese, but to have another steady flow of cash into the government. This failed, however, as most left and some didn't pay. Few revolts also happened, such as the Senora protest on May 19, 1850. Around 4,000 foreigners started a protest that was shut down by a group of 500 tax collectors who shot at the group of protesters. In 1851, John McDougall succeeded Burnett as the governor of California. He repealed the act as he felt that the Chinese presence helped with California's labor shortage. The tax was gone just 1 year after it had been signed. This again angered Americans, and the repealing didn't last long.
The majority of people couldn't pay $20 a month. And what it ended up doing was it convinced a lot of miners to actually leave. A lot of these foreign miners. And then the irony of this is the people who got this repealed, it was not because of any labor strikes or anything of that nature from the Chinese, Mexican and South American laborers. It was actually a lot of the Caucasians who had moved to these areas and started stores and were renting and selling equipment and were, renting out housing. All of a sudden, they were having a harder time making ends meet, and they successfully lobbied for the for the tax to be repealed. It was repealed for a single year, and then in 1852, it was put back in, but at a rate of $3 a month.
John Bigler succeeded McDougall, and he felt the same way that Burnett did. Foreigners should not be allowed to mine under the same conditions as Americans should. So he signed the Foreign Miners License Tax Act of 1852. This tax wasn't as harsh as the previous tax, but still kept a lot of foreign presence out of California. Now anyone who wasn't a citizen of the US had to pay $3 a month instead of the previous $20 a month. Though the tax was lower, many still could not pay it, as the average salary for mining was around $6 a month. They still had to pay for living materials and food. To avoid any more conflict, the Chinese would only mine at abandoned mine fields instead of where the Americans would mine.
Regardless of the expensive tax and the hatred felt by many Americans, a lot of foreigners stuck around. The California Gold Rush came to a conclusion in 1855 after most of the gold was found. California was shaped to be the place of dreams. The gold rush was a way for young men to strike riches with hard work and a lot of luck. Foreigners were treated differently than Americans when it came to mining, but regardless, some made a lot of money. The Foreign Miners Tax Act of 1850 resolved the growing conflict that Americans had against the Chinese and Mexicans and allowed the gold rush to flourish even more than it had before.